Once again, welcome to Past Paradise, where we unearth historical gems. Today we're going to look at vinyl records, which are a mix of nostalgia and exploration. In the digital age, we may choose Spotify playlists, but let's not overlook the allure of ancient vinyl records lying in forgotten corners. These albums span decades, from the early 1900s, when vinyl first appeared, to the swinging 1960s and 1970s when it reached its pinnacle. And what do you know? Once thought to be outmoded, these vintage vinyls are now highly sought after by hipsters and audiophiles. The worst part is that there are some really valuable diamonds among the documents. Thanks to technology, vinyl records have become the fantasy of record enthusiasts. You may get richer if you discover a rare record. One of these unique treasures may be hidden in an old attic box that you own. These works of art could be worth a look. Bring on this nostalgic adventure you won't want to miss as we explore the fascinating world of vintage vinyl records valued at thousands of dollars today. So dust out those boxes and come along. Tommy Johnson, Alcohol and Jake Blues. Year 1930. Record label, Paramount. Worth today, $37,100. Rare blues records are beloved by everybody. In 1930, Tommy Johnson signed a distribution contract with Paramount and released Alcohol and Jake Blues. That was significant even in those days. Since there are no longer master tapes to the album, each copy, of which there are very few, is very expensive. One of the most important American Delta blues musicians to record in the late 1920s, Johnson's style impacted other musicians like Howlin' Wolf, Robert Nighthawk, and Canned Heat, a band that took its name from one of Johnson's songs, Big Road Blues. In 2013, buyer John Tifteller paid $37,100 to acquire one copy. These days, one copy is probably worth a pretty penny. He had one earlier, but this one was in far better shape, he said. He reasoned that because the vinyl is so uncommon, it would be foolish to pass it up. The Beatles, Yesterday and Today. Year 1966. Record label, Capitol Records. Worth today, $125,000. Sometimes the artwork grabs people's attention more than the album itself. The Beatles' 1966 single, Yesterday and Today, established their fame beyond only John and Paul's poetic prowess. The band was first discovered in flesh on the cover of the compilation CD. The record label opted to replace it with something more agreeable, since they weren't too delighted with it. The Beatles' ninth Capitol Records album, Yesterday and Today, included songs from the band's EMI albums that Capitol had declined to distribute. It included tracks that the Beatles had previously released in non-album format elsewhere. The goal was to increase fan purchases, and Capitol was ultimately rather effective in doing so. Only a handful of copies of the record still have the original cover in circulation. One copy of this type sold for $125,000 in February 2013. Although it's a significant amount of money for a single circular piece of plastic, collectors value it like gold dust. U2, Pride, In the Name of Love. Year 1984. Record label, Festival Records. Worth today, $9,000. Irish sensation U2's corpus of work has brought them an enormous amount of wealth. They were recording Pride, In the Name of Love, back in the 1980s, and although regular copies of the album are widely available, the Australian pressing is very uncommon and remarkable. Pride, the album's opening track, was composed with civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. in mind. Although it was met with mixed reviews at the time, it has now become one of the band's most well-known and well-liked tracks. Since the band's early days, Pride has appeared on several compilations. The transparent vinyl is reported to have only ever been produced in 50 copies, most of which are long since lost. The actual number of copies left is unknown, but when they do come up for sale, they may go for around $9,000. However, Bono won't be purchasing it since he doesn't like the song. Bruce Springsteen, Spirit in the Night, year 1973. Record label, Columbia. Worth today, $5,000. Although Bruce Springsteen had been working hard for some time before releasing Born to Run, many people would believe that he became successful right away. Spirit in the Night, his first single from 1973, was mostly overlooked when it was originally released. But as The Boss got more well-known, the song's demand increased. Since only a few quantities were produced, a promotional copy hidden away in your record collection may be worth hundreds of dollars. The originals are far more expensive, often costing fortunate bidders $5,000 or more. Spirit in the Night has an intriguing tale. After hearing Springsteen's first album, Clive Davis started to worry about the record's potential for financial success. Springsteen wrote Spirit in the Night and Blinded by the Light as a result of his refusal to release it without further singles. The Rolling Stones, Street Fighting Man, year 1968. Record label, London. Worth today, $17,000. Could the Rolling Stones, before they became famous, have known how long their legacy would continue in 1968? Most likely not. The band didn't think about anything except music when they were too busy dating lovely ladies and enjoying the glamorous lifestyle of rock stars. Never one to back down from controversy, the band's original Street Fighting Man cover included a stark black and white picture of a policeman standing over wounded demonstrators. The record company felt that this was a bad idea then and burned all the original copies. Out of all the records, just 18 survived. One of these rare pieces sold for $17,000 in 2011. Later, in 1995, Jan Wenner interviewed Mick Jagger for Rolling Stone, and he didn't hold back. Jagger claimed to have considered the turbulence of the 1970s to be a very good thing. His bandmates even claimed that Jagger participated in the protest at Grosvenor Square, where he was detained and prosecuted by the authorities. The Quarrymen, That'll Be the Day, year 1958. Record label, Kensington. Worth today, $3,500. The Quarrymen, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and John Lennon, were busy attempting to establish themselves before they met Ringo Starr and formed the Beatles. The trio recorded a rendition of Buddy Holly's That'll Be the Day in an attempt to make their initial steps toward success, but the single was never officially released. Paul simply pressed around 50 copies to give as gifts to family and friends. Although the original edition may fetch an exceptionally high price, reproduction still cost more than $3,500. The Quarrymen had a happy reunion in 1997 when its 4 remaining original members got together to perform a performance. They were performing the reunion of McCartney and Lennon, which took place 40 years ago at a garden party. 3 of the founding members of Quarrymen still played live today. Bob Saget and the Silver Bullet Band, Stranger in Town. Year 1978. Record label, Capitol Records. Worth today, varies. One of Bob Saget and the Silver Bullet Band's classic albums is Stranger in Town. Capitol Records released this vinyl record in 1978, and because of its unique combination of rock and Saget's unusual vocalizations, it has become a collector's item. Together with the other songs, the album's title smash single catapulted it to significant prominence and cemented Saget's place as a powerful force in the music industry. It's notable for its unique album cover art as well, which offers a glimpse into the style of the late 1970s. Due to factors like rarity and preservation, its price and collectability now vary, making it a popular choice among vinyl aficionados worldwide. Steely Dan, Can't Buy a Thrill, year 1972. Record label, ABC Records. Worth today, $1,450. Can't Buy a Thrill, which was recorded in 1972 at the Village Recorder in Los Angeles, was Steely Dan's first album. When it was released in November 1972, the American rock group's remarkable career officially began. Do It Again opened the legendary rock album, and Turn That Heartbeat Over Again closed it. Robert Lockhart created the artwork for Can't Buy a Thrill, depicting a scene from Rouen, France, prohibited in Spain. Later, Walter Becker and Donald Fagen, two of Steely Dan's members, dubbed the album's cover art from the 1970s the most hideous album cover. Elvis Presley, Rock and Roll, year 1956. Record label RCA Victor. Worth today $1,530. Elvis Presley's first album, Rock and Roll, was released in the UK. Presley made his eponymous debut in America. When it was first released, rock and roll was still relatively new for certain big labels. Major labels had never heard of the genre before, but rock and roll demonstrated its viability. With sales of more than 1 million copies, the album became the first $1 million release for RCA, the record label on which it was released. William Robertson took the album cover shot. Rolling Stone listed Rock and Roll as one of the 100 greatest album covers in 1991. Queen Rocks, year 1997. Record label Parlophone, Hollywood. Worth today $1,413. For the Queen Rocks is distinct. Although it is a compilation CD, the typical greatest hits formula isn't fully followed. Rather, it emphasizes deep tunes, with a few hits thrown in. Some of the songs on Queen Rocks, such as Sheer Heart Attack, Tear It Up, and Put Out the Fire, were not made available as singles. EMI produced this distinctive record. It was released on Parlophone in Europe. However, Hollywood is listed as the label in the US. Another reason Queen Rocks is a dark horse in the Queen catalog is because it had songs without Freddie Mercury on them. The Beatles, The White Album, year 1968. Record label, Apple Records. Worth today, $790,000. The Beatles are so well known that it makes sense that they have several unique vinyl records. Their 1968 double LP of the same name became known as the White LP. Even though an enormous number of copies were sold, Ringo Starr kept the first copy that was ever printed. The record with the serial number 000001 was kept by the drummer until 2015, when he decided to put it up for sale. Ringo's most valuable asset was sold by Julien's in the United States for $790,000. Starr's drum set, incidentally, sold for an incredible $2.2 million on the same day. In case you didn't know, Apple Records was established by the Beatles back in 1968. Originally intended to be their creative outlet, Badfinger, Billy Preston, Mary Hopkin, and James Taylor were among the other musicians who eventually performed on the album. The Beatles' solo albums from the mid-1970s were released by Apple Records. Prince, The Black Album, also known as The Funk Bible, year 1986 through 1987. Record label, Warner Records. Worth today, $42,300. Prince released The Black Album in 1987. This vinyl's promo version was not very well known. The artist's name, portrait, credits, and title were not printed. It was only a disc with black sleeves. The number 25677 that appears on the disc itself was the only insignia of the vinyl. The same number appeared on the commercial edition of this record, although it was pink. Prince responded to accusations that he had become too pop-oriented with the Black Album. The record covered a lot of ground. Shortly after its debut, Prince worried that TBA was evil, demanded its withdrawal, and replaced it with Love Sexy. The White Stripes, Lafayette Blues, year 1998. Record label, Italy Records. Worth today, $12,700. Even though the White Stripes haven't been around for very long, their influence is still very much felt today. Dave Buick, the creator of Italy Records, produced a hand-painted cover for their 1998 song Lafayette Blues. The White Stripes, a garage rock band, took the moniker Lafayette Blues from the neighborhoods around Detroit, Michigan, where they were born and raised. French names may be found on several streets in Detroit. The names are arranged in a variety of ways in live Stripes performances of the track. The vinyl's B-side features the song Sugar Never Tasted So Good. Since there were just a few copies of the single produced to sell at one of their concerts, they are now worth a significant amount of money. It's interesting that they only sold for $6 at the time. They are now selling for $12,700 if you are in the market for a rare record. That's more than just spare coins. The Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, signed by all four Beatles. Year 1967. Record label Parlophone. Worth today $290,000. Anything that bears the signatures of all four Beatles is certain to be very valuable. In such condition, the studio album by Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band is valued at around $300,000. This album was released by the Beatles on May 26, 1967 in the UK. The US had to wait a few days longer on June 2, 1967. Like almost every album by the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band was a huge hit in both nations. For 27 weeks, it topped the UK Albums Chart. It spent 15 weeks at the top of the charts in the US. Wu-Tang Clan, Once Upon a Time in Shaolin. Year 2015. Record label RZA. Worth today $2 million. The Wu-Tang Clan is undoubtedly capable of pulling off a stunning trick. Over 6 years, the hip-hop group secretly recorded Once Upon a Time in Shaolin. There was only ever a single copy produced, therefore it didn't build to a major release. It brought in a whopping $2 million at auction. The recording of Once Upon a Time in Shaolin was done in secret over 6 years. It was kept safe in a vault at the Royal Mansour Hotel in Marrakesh, Morocco, pending auction and sale via the music auction business Paddle 8. Civilring's historical studies on the Renaissance served as the inspiration for the album. Remarkably, the band included a provision that states, if successful, the seller may lawfully plan and attempt to execute one heist or caper to steal back the album and restore all ownership rights to the seller. Actor Bill Murray and/or current members of the Wu-Tang Clan are the only ones who may carry out the robbery or caper without facing legal ramifications. Sex Pistols, God Save the Queen, No Feeling. Year 1977. Record label Virgin A&M. Worth today $17,000. Anyone who has ever heard the words God Save the Queen can probably predict how contentious this B-side vinyl record was. The A-side was No Feeling. Here's the Sex Pistols, Never Mind the Bollocks, would include both singles. In 1977, God Save the Queen was published in conjunction with the Silver Jubilee, marking the 25th anniversary of Queen Elizabeth II's accession to the throne. The Sex Pistols said that the time of the single's release was coincidental, rejecting the idea that it was a result of the tragedy. The Independent Broadcasting Authority and the BBC would both outlaw this LP. It is prohibited even now. Elvis Presley, That's All Right. Year 1954. Record label Sun. Worth today $4,000. Elvis Presley, the hip-shaking, foot-stomping king of rock, wasn't afraid to cover other people's tunes. The producer felt it was so amazing that he decided to record Presley's rendition of Arthur Crudup's That's All Right, which he had been tinkering with while working on other material in the studio. History is what's left. Elvis became one of the most well-known people in the world when this song became his first single. These days, original pressings in immaculate condition fetch around $4,000. It is widely regarded as the very first rock and roll song ever recorded. Rolling Stone concurred. listing That's All Right by Elvis Presley as one of the greatest songs ever and included it in their 2010 list of the 500 greatest songs of all time in music. The song came in at number 113. The song debuted at the top of various national charts when it was reissued on an anniversary CD 50 years after it was first published. Elton John, I've Been Loving You, year 1968. Record label, Philips. Worth today, $5,000. One of the best examples of a multi-talented artist is Elton John. In addition to having unmatched piano skills, he also sings and writes songs that connect deeply with his listeners. He is a genius. 1968 saw the release of I've Been Loving You, his first hit. Remarkably, John was too shy to acknowledge that he composed the song himself. Therefore, Bernie Taupin was given credit for it. After a while, he told the truth. John wasn't afraid of Taupin. Rather, he intended to give the songwriter, who penned several other songs in their well-known collaboration, authorship credit so that the latter would get his first publication earnings. Shortly after its publication, I've Been Loving You was taken from the charts, therefore the royalties were short-lived. Only one copy of the single is known to exist, making copies very difficult to locate. It is believed to be worth $5,000. We have to say goodbye to another journey through the annals of musical history as the needle rises and the last notes disappear into thin air. We hope you've enjoyed this in-depth exploration into the world of antique vinyl and maybe even found some hidden treasures for yourself.
If you've watched the video till here, that means you've enjoyed the video. Subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notifications bell icon